Well, welcome back to Mr. Obsolete's Vintage Homesteading. Okay, we're going to talk about these two Stihl saws here. You got the O31 and the O34. And the title says, what were they thinking? And what does that mean? Well, it means how that basic chassis of saw changes over time and what happens. And so instead of the products evolving and getting better, we're going to talk about how they devolve and get worse. And so the other thing is we can call it the road to cheesedom. Okay, well, we're going to show some of the stuff that devolved over time. Now the O31 here was a very popular saw, and the O32 that replaced it. It's a 48cc saw. It was made from 1971 to 82, so 11 years run. So the chassis is all metal on it. And then come over here on the O34. It was 84 to 93, so it's 9 years, so it had a long run too. But I just want to show how the saws and stuff, like I say, devolve and get cheapened up over time. So we'll start here. Okay, well, you can see that there's a nice guide plate here for the chain, inner and outer. You got a nice heavy duty clutch with 3 shoes on it. And then we come over here. You can see there's just a really cheap little tin plate here. Really cheapo and flimsy. And there's no outer guide plate. It has these 2 little plastic pieces which are fairly worn on this thing. And here they are. They're easy to change and stuff, but the thing I just don't understand, after working on saws all these years, is that why they can't just stamp out a nice little steel plate like that, which is cheap and simple, and go to this where they have little plastic pieces in them. And the problem with saws like this too is that there's no interchangeability of parts other than maybe the spark plug. And so the thing is, like I say, this is an all metal chassis. This is basically all plastic. So anyway, this has a nice clutch on it. I just replaced the sprocket and stuff on it. Really easy to service though. So anyway, I'll be right back. Well, here's another thing that devolved over time. It's the starters. Now this starter was non-functional when I got this saw. And it's a simple design. It's all metal. And we'll come over and do a close-up here. But it has 2 dogs to engage for the starter mechanism on it. And on this one, everything is cheap plastic. You can only see it only has 1 starter dog on it. Now, the later version of this saw actually had 2 of them, and you can see right here that there's a place for it. And so we'll upgrade that here in a second. But the thing is that, for this series of saw, why they would only put 1 starter pawl in, because this thing has really high compression. It's 10.5 to 1, and it has no decompression valve. So these cheap little pawls here break and bend over really easily. And then when Stihl probably had tons of complaints, or when they went into the dealer for a service for the starter repairs, they put another pawl in it and made it better. But the thing is, I find with Stihl stuff is that they do changes. And so like if you're a dealer and start selling these early on, and it has this little clip with a single spring clip and then a single pawl, and then the later one comes out, so you have to have a different spring. The pawls are the same, but just a proliferation of parts on these things when they go over time. And when they have a million different things on these that are changed, the dealer has to stock a whole bunch of different parts. just another brief talk about the clutches on this one. The clutches are all the same on that one. Now this one, the bearing inside the clutch hub, there's two different sizes and there's three different clutch drums. One of them is for a different size chain, but the thing is, one has a spur sprocket where you can change the sprocket. The other drum and the sprocket are all one piece. Why not just put one with a changeable sprocket on it in the first place? So anyway, that's part of the reason that Stihl is so bad about parts for their older saws. You know, you take a basic saw and you have X number of parts in it, and then with the changes and different things that they've done on it, then you have to stock another 40% more parts for the same saw. Another one is the air filter. There's three different air filters for these, and the mufflers, there's at least 4 different ones. And that's what my German mechanic buddy would say, "Yeah, this is stupid." Okay, well, we're gonna upgrade the starter here, so we take our spring clip off, take our second pawl and drop in here. Okay, well, we got our second pawl put in. I thought that would be just a real simple little job. Just drops in and then change the spring clip here, but the problem is that the plastic here is atrophied and it wouldn't go in, so I had to take a drill and drill it out a little bit. But now it works fine. You can see that. That's why you shouldn't use plastic on this stuff. Should be metal. So anyway, we'll move on to the next part. Okay, well, here's another little weird feature on it. The O31 here, the spark plug is right here, and you can just pull the boot off and change it. On this one, it's underneath the cover here, and you can't put the cover on unless the spark plug wire is disconnected, so that's kind of bizarre, but pretty strange. Okay, like I say, this saw is kind of an anomaly, and the reason for that is that even though it's got a lot of cheesy features on it, it has some really good features on it too, like changing the carburetor on this. Just a very, very simple thing. Take the air cleaner off and a couple of 8mm nuts, and the throttle and the choke linkage on most saws like this one, you have to pull the carburetor out and then you have to turn it because it has a little hook on the end of the rods that operate this stuff. Well, on this one, they just set in the spot there, and the spring tension on the throttle and the choke shaft actually hold them in place. So you just pull them off by hand, set them aside, and take the carb off. It's probably the easiest saw to change a carburetor on I've ever worked on. The exhaust is really easy to get to and work on too. So, but you know, just the weird features on this saw, the way that the starting pad here is, you know, my regular shoe won't fit in there. Okay, well, like I say, the starter pad here is too small. Must have been designed for elves in the Black Forest in Germany. And the shoe will not fit through there. And even if I could get it in there, it would interfere with the throttle. Like on this one, shoe goes right in, no problem. So what's the solution to the problem here? Well, I'll show you. I have my factory approved Stihl starting shoe. And see, it has this nice feature on here like this. And so when I go to start it, it just goes in there just like that. And it's ready to go. So anytime I use this saw, I have to have 2 different shoes on. Well, the mufflers on these are one thing that's easy to service on both saws. And so that makes it nice and handy to work on. Now the other thing I've talked about is the control here for the throttle and stuff. Let me take the air cleaner off. Right here you can see, I talked about in a prior video, just this little plastic shaft across here, and in low position is choked, and in the middle position is run, and all the way up is off. It makes it real easy to operate and stuff, but personally I don't like it that much. All this linkage in here, when I got this saw originally to get it running from my buddy Mr. C, all that stuff was bent and screwed up and had to take a long time to fiddle around to get everything back in order. But you know, this stuff, old school stuff like this, is what I like. So you get your kill switch right here, get your choke right here. This knob can take the air cleaner cover off for instant access. The other thing I really like is the anti-vibe stuff's right out here in the open. You can see if they're deteriorated. These are all built inside the saw, so that's another thing I don't like. But the last thing I'm going to talk about, which is really weird on this saw, is the tank vent, fuel tank vent. And over its production run of 9 years, there was 4 different styles, which are not interchangeable. So they had different gas tanks and different things like that. I mean, like my buddy Fritz, the German mechanic, says, stupid. Okay, well, that pretty much covers it. But one last thing I'm going to talk about is the chassis again, because this saw, top cover, side cover, chassis is all metal. This one, plastic, 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 plastic. And so the idea behind that is to make the saw lighter, supposedly. So let's see what the difference is. Okay, the O31 here, power head weighs 14.5 pounds. And this one weighs 13 pounds, so all that plastic and stuff on it, which deteriorates and breaks down over time, only saves 1.5 pounds on the saw. So what Stihl should have done, in my opinion anyway, and many other saw manufacturers did, was they took a saw like this, like I said, it was in production for 11 years as an O31 plus some time as an O32. That's well-proven design, simple to work on, like I say, all metal. All they should have done is to change it to make a little bit bigger displacement saw like this. Just change the piston and the crankshaft. They could make the stroke a little bit longer and the piston bigger. But they chose to completely start from scratch, so that there again, the only parts interchangeable are the spark plugs. So anyway, I'm going to show you a couple of other saws that devolved over time too, not just Stihl. Well, like I say, Stihl isn't the only one that devolved their saws over time. Here's another prime example. Over here we got our Homelite XL12. It's the longest running single model of any chainsaw ever made. Everything on it is pretty much metal except for the gas cap and the air cleaner cover. And the earlier models actually had a metal cover. They devolved into this, which is the Homelite Timber Man, or as I call it, Timber Mouse, because it has mouse power. And in my opinion, this is the worst chainsaw ever made. It makes a pulling wild thing or a wood carp. They're much better, even though they're both throwaway saws. So anyway, I got one last little thing for you. Okay, well, if you watch my older videos, you see that some of my saws have nicknames if they have some outstanding feature. Well, this one does. Has a couple actually. One of them is 111cc, and it's got a 60-inch bar on it. And it's got plenty of power to run it. So this one is Mr. Porker the Torker, and it's not a high-speed saw. It's a torque saw. Cutting speed's about 7,000 RPM. But anyway, I've got this in a couple of videos if you go back and watch it. So anyway, the thing about saws like this, you know, I'm spoiled because up until about 3 years ago, all the saws I had pretty much were all old metal saws. Just in the last 3 years, you know, I ended up with a couple of cheesy pull-ins and a couple others. The Homelight Timber Mouse is the only really cheesy plastic saw I've had for years and years. I was foolish enough and bought it new. So we'll be back with our next saw with that name. Well, our next saw here's got a pet name. It's this one, our Stihl O21. It's an 89cc saw, 36-inch roller nose, bar and chain, 404 on it. But this one is Mr. Oinker because it's a big old hog. That powerful, does a really good job out in the woods. Go back and watch some of our former videos, like the day the earth stood still. There's 4 episodes and this is in most of them. We'll be back with the next. Well, here's the newest saw with a name. Mr. Cheesy, because of all the cheesy features on it. But one thing I will say about this saw, even though I'm ranking on a lot of the stuff on it, because like I say, I've had metal saws almost exclusively for years. The outstanding feature on this saw is the power. This thing is very powerful. I got some information that said this was the best power to weight ratio Stihl saw that they made up until just recently with one of the new hot rod pro saws. The thing that's unusual about this though is I've been told that this was sold as a professional grade saw, but it's amazing with all the cheap homeowner stuff on it. But here's another thing. You know, like I say, what were they thinking? Here's the original bar off it. There's no provision to lubricate the tip. And then that don't cut it. And here's a Stihl Roll-O-Matic 18-inch that goes on the O31 or the O25, depending on what I want to use it for. But these are a good bar, and you can lube it, whatnot. It's the only thing I've had. I only have 2 saws that have the Roll-O-Matics on them, and I found that cutting in rotten wood that's got sawdust in it, it plugs up the tip and locks it up. So the only other saws I have that are 2 of my low-end pull-ins. But anyway, since this bar here for the O34 was beyond use, it had gone too far, I was looking around for a new bar for it. Had a 20-inch on it, but I decided to get a Sumara bar because these are supposed to be one of the best ones on the market. And this is a 24-inch one. Saw's got plenty of power, should run this just fine. But you know, the last bar I bought, this one, was on a closeout, and it had a Stihl chain on it. Unfortunately, it wasn't the green chain, it was the RS chain, which really works good. I like that RS chain really well. The only thing I don't like about it is it's overpriced. But anyway, I couldn't find a Roll-O-Matic for a reasonable price. Everybody wanted some stupid Stihl price for them, and this was almost $30 cheaper, and this is a whole much better bar. So anyway, I just gone through the carburetor and a bunch of stuff on this, so when I get it tree down, we'll take it out and give it the smoke test here with the 24-inch bar. So there you have it, the weird and unusual O34. Would I recommend it? Yeah, if you got a gorilla arm for starting it. These things don't have a decompression valve on them. The O36, the later version with a little more displacement, did. So this saw would have been ideal even with the cheap features on it if it would have had a decompression valve and a purge valve for the fuel system. It would have been an outstanding saw. But like I say, a number of pros have given me information on these and said that, you know, when these came out, they used them a lot out in the woods, and they were reliable and powerful, so they had a good reputation. So anyway, see you next week on another exciting video. Vintage is good.